Section 1 of Israel and Hamas Conflict in Brief by Jim Zanotti and Jeremy M. Sharp. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Conflict Overview. Initial attacks, ongoing conflict, and humanitarian crisis. On October 7, 2023, the Palestinian Sunni Islamist group Hamas, a U.S.-designated foreign terrorist organization, or FTO, led a series of surprise attacks from the Gaza Strip against Israel, see Figure 1. Palestine Islamic Jihad, or PIJ, another FTO, claimed that its forces also participated in the attacks, and other militants outside of Hamas and PIJ may also have joined. The assault targeted Israeli military bases and civilian areas during the final Jewish high holiday. The October 7th attacks' scope and lethality had no precedent in the 16 years since Hamas seized control of Gaza. The nature of the violence stunned Israelis and many others, and includes allegations of sexual violence. The apparent intelligence and operational failures in preventing the assault or limiting its impact have become a subject of debate in Israel and elsewhere. Some analysts have said that Israel may have missed signals, over-relied on technological solutions, and/or misread Hamas's intentions. Whether or not Iran had a role in the attack remains a question. Iran reportedly provides material support to Hamas, and according to U.S. officials may be complicit in a broad sense, but President Joe Biden said in October, quote, "There is no evidence," end quote, that Iran helped plan the attack. In response to the attacks, Israel's cabinet declared war on Hamas, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu formed an emergency unity government with an opposition party. Israel also initially halted supplies from Israeli territory to Gaza of electricity, food, and fuel. Since the outbreak of conflict, Israel and Egypt, via consultations with U.S. and UN officials, have coordinated the use of Egypt's Rafah crossing with Gaza, and later also Israel's Kerem Shalom crossing, to bring some international aid into the territory in a way that seeks to prevent diversion by Hamas. Israel's military mobilized hundreds of thousands of troops, has bombarded targets in Gaza from the air, and undertaken ground operations as well. About 1.7 million of Gaza's roughly 2.1 million people have been displaced from their homes, some multiple times, and most face profound humanitarian challenges, discussed below. At various points in the conflict, Hamas and other Gaza-based militants have fired rockets indiscriminately into Israel. As of early February, the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, controls some areas above ground in northern Gaza, while it engages in operations farther south in an effort to target Hamas and its top leaders, including in Hamas's vast network of tunnels. Reportedly, as of February 5, 2024, more than 1,200 Israelis and foreign nationals, including 35 U.S. citizens in Israel, and more than 27,000 Palestinians in Gaza had been killed, and over 60% of Gaza's housing units have been destroyed or damaged. Hamas and other groups reportedly seized around 240 Israeli and foreign national hostages on October 7th, including some Americans. Recovering hostages has been a major Israeli and U.S. concern. Qatar, Egypt, and the United States facilitated a multi-day pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas in the final week of November. During the pause, 110 hostages held in Gaza, including 2 U.S.-Israeli dual citizens, and 250 Palestinian prisoners held by Israel were released. Hamas and other groups reportedly still hold around 130 persons in Gaza, including about 6 Americans, but reports suggest that some of these hostages could be dead. The conflict's impact on civilians has generated a humanitarian crisis. As of early February, UN and World Health Organization officials have raised many public health concerns associated with overcrowding, acute water, food, and fuel shortages, poor sanitation, and challenges to hospitals' safety and functionality. Observers debate how to apportion blame between Israel and Hamas for dangers to civilians and the worsening of already dire humanitarian conditions in Gaza. while those faulting Israel argue that Israeli actions have inflicted casualties and limited life-sustaining supplies, those blaming Hamas assert that Hamas personnel in Gaza and other militants reportedly contribute to making civilian areas and facilities unsafe by operating in or near them. Areas of possible conflict expansion. Since the October 7th attacks, significant U.S. and international attention has focused on the extent to which conflict might expand in other areas of the region. West Bank. Tensions and violence have continued between Palestinians and Israelis. West Bank-based officials from the Palestinian Authority/Palestine Liberation Organization appear to be in a difficult position. While they do not endorse Hamas, they have refrained from publicly condemning it, perhaps because of a perceived spike in West Bank Palestinian support for Hamas that may stem from Hamas's military actions, the prisoner releases it has secured, and civilian suffering in Gaza. U.S. officials and lawmakers have signaled concerns related to Israeli actions in the West Bank that may affect stable living conditions for Palestinians. The administration has imposed visa bans on some extremist Israeli settlers, delayed a firearms shipment to Israel, and has called on Israel to ease or end measures that have precipitously decreased Palestinian Authority revenues since October 7th. Additionally, in early February, President Biden issued an executive order authorizing, quote, financial sanctions against those directing or participating in certain actions, including acts or threats of violence against civilians, intimidating civilians to cause them to leave their homes, destroying or seizing property, or engaging in terrorist activity in the West Bank, end quote, and impose sanctions on 4 individuals. Iran-backed actors elsewhere. Iran supports several non-state actors across the Middle East and armed groups in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen expressing support for the October 7th attacks have attacked Israeli or U.S. positions. Israel has exchanged fire with the Shia Islamist group Lebanese Hezbollah, a foreign terrorist organization, and Palestinian militants across Israel's northern border with Lebanon. If these clashes escalate, Hezbollah's arsenal of some 150,000 missiles and rockets could pose a grave threat to Israeli strategic sites and population centers. U.S. officials are reportedly seeking to broker a withdrawal of Hezbollah forces from border areas to facilitate the return of an estimated 80,000 evacuated Israelis to their homes in the north. Israeli officials have threatened wider military action to address the issue absent a diplomatic resolution. As of early 2024, post-October 7th attacks by the Houthi militia in Yemen have targeted shipping lanes that transit the Bab al-Mandab Strait, significantly disrupting maritime trade and triggering military responses from U.S. and United Kingdom forces. Groups in Iraq and Syria have attacked U.S. forces stationed in the region over 160 times, including a January 29th drone attack in Jordan that killed 3 U.S. soldiers and injured more than 40. In early February, U.S. forces conducted additional retaliatory strikes against Iranian and Iran-backed forces in Iraq and Syria. Political developments. Israel's war management cabinet includes key opposition figure Benny Gantz, a former defense minister and chief IDF commander, alongside Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Netanyahu has consistently articulated Israeli goals of securing the hostages' return and destroying Hamas's military and governing capabilities. As tens of thousands of troops have withdrawn and military operations have decreased somewhat in intensity in early 2024, Israeli leaders have debated how to proceed. Reportedly, Netanyahu, Gallant, and top military commanders refused to leave Hamas in control of Gaza and argued that continued military pressure, perhaps for a year or more, may be necessary to obtain hostages' release. Apparently, Gantz and some non-voting observers in the war cabinet have expressed support for getting hostages released urgently, given the dangers they face, even if it requires a lengthy ceasefire. Some analysts have questioned, quote, whether Hamas can be toppled as Gaza's governing and military power under the existing strategy, end quote. While the IDF estimates that some 10,000 out of 30,000 Hamas fighters have been killed, Hamas's unconventional tactics and tunnel network have helped its resilience and allowed its most senior leaders to elude Israel. Netanyahu has reportedly said that Israel might accept their expulsion rather than their killing or capture. As of early February, negotiations are reportedly ongoing for a proposed hostage prisoner exchange that could pause the fighting for several weeks or more. Israeli officials are apparently debating the specifics of the proposed exchange and how it might affect Israeli military operations, while Hamas may be bargaining for a cessation of hostilities. Arab states. Popular sentiment has placed pressure on Arab governments to oppose Israeli actions in Gaza, even though many Arab leaders might welcome an end to Hamas rule there. Together with other members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Arab countries have called for an end to, quote, Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip, end quote, more humanitarian aid, and a freeze on international arms exports to Israel. International organizations. On November 15th, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 2712, which called for, quote, urgent and extended humanitarian pauses, end quote, and the, quote, immediate and unconditional release of all hostages held by Hamas and other groups, end quote, and urged all parties to refrain from depriving civilians in Gaza of, quote, basic services and humanitarian assistance indispensable to their survival, end quote. On December 22nd, the Security Council adopted Resolution 2720, which called for, quote, urgent steps to immediately allow safe, unhindered, and expanded humanitarian access and to create the conditions for a sustainable cessation of hostilities, end quote. The United States abstained from both resolutions. On January 26th, the International Court of Justice found that it had jurisdiction over allegations by South Africa that Israel may have committed acts of genocide, and ordered Israel, among other provisional measures, to prevent the commission of or incitement to genocide, to, quote, enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance, end quote, to Palestinians in Gaza, and to report on its compliance with the court's order 1 month later. End of Section 1, read by Elsie Selwyn.